Hello, this is the Urban Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important. Reach out to me. Alright, you can do this through email and YouTube. Now, I greatly appreciate all of y'all. And word of mouth is important, so feel free to spread the word about the Harbor Light. Get that out there. Alright, so, topic of choice here. I'm going to give my thoughts about the aspects of the X-Men. Now, this is going to lead up to me, because on next week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the comic book that Legion, the show Legion is based on, and then give my thoughts on that. So, without further ado, let's get into the subject. Here we go. Alright, so X-Men. Now there's two things I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about X-Men itself, my thoughts. And then I'm going to talk about real world events that the X-Men was actually based upon, and Stanley Lee addressed and talk about in his legacy. Alright, so X-Men, I really find the comic book and the everything in general with X-Men really interesting, because I would say X-Men and Batman were one of the two comics that really got me interested in the aspects of comic books itself. Now I would say, I saw the Batman movie, Tim Burton, and the one from Schumacher is a mess, but Tim Burton's version was really good, and that got me interested. And then the even it was kitschy, but even growing up, there just was always in my conception or my view, Batman with with Adam West and the series. I used to look at that as a kiddo growing up. Alright, and then with X-Men, I would say the Saturday morning cartoons was interesting with the story plot. And the way that it was presented, and the Saturday morning cartoon, even though it's for kids, it was presented in a way that was more up tier. And so this gets into the very interesting aspect that I think what separates a lot of content, and specifically now that we're talking about comic books, from all the rest, story plots. And see, that's why, relating to what I was talking about on last Friday, that's why it's very disappointing, when, something like a movie, which is nothing new, but when the adaptations are not good, and the reason why to justify it either is politics, where politics might be gender politics or whatever reason, to say, well, these people don't really have much creativity in telling a story. They just don't know how to do that quite well. Okay? I'll be right back. Now, on Friday, I'm going to talk about a different subject matter, so I'm not going to particularly give a YouTube shout out on Friday. But this time, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give a YouTube shout out this time, early. So, now, I mentioned his content before, but I'm going to mention it again now because it's very relevant to what I'm talking about in the subject matter here. Now, there is a fellow co-worker of mine on YouTube. I consider these people co-workers, even though they might have different viewpoints than me, or I don't, it's weird to have this idea I must agree, have some people say that they're tolerant, but if you don't agree with everything, then you're nothing to them. But anyway, with other YouTubers that I mentioned before, I don't per se agree with everything they say, but I give credit where credit is due, and I find that before you sleep. Now, I think he's very poignant in the way that he executes and talks about certain issues because it's he's quite transparent in the aspects that is very, I really agree with a lot with what he says. But, some things early on that he talked about earlier in his channel, because I've watched this channel for a long time, for quite some time. And I was like, but, in his evolving in his thoughts, it's quite nice to see the progression. All right, so with that said, now he talked about the aspects of this recent video game that has come out called Mixtape or something like that. And it's wild because, it's gotten so many different critically acclaimed views from so-called well-renowned video game production companies, and it's alarming because this game is just really pointless. You don't have to work to do anything. You get through the story plot. Even the creators themselves have said, well, this is really supposed to have been a movie, but they just couldn't get it together, and rightly so, because they don't really know how to tell stories in a way that is appealing. Even the people that they're supposed to be, attracting, the audience wouldn't relate to it because, most stuff is I would understand it because, I really, I have a good knowledge of music. I'm not saying I know everything, but I just love music so much, and I would appreciate that. But, who wants to be looking at a movie where it just falls flat on a lot of tension, where it can bring the story and the characters to come to terms with things where they should be coming to terms with things, and this whole idea of being pretentious is fine, which is any normal person doesn't want to be around somebody that's just that's their personality trait, it to be pretentious, and it's just nuts. All right, so I will link this particular video, Think Before You Sleep, onto this channel to give that YouTube shout out. So this example is the whole reason why I say that, and then when I talked about Supergirl, why I say that stories are really key points into the aspect of what makes something different from the rest. And then he also went in and talked about the Resident Evil game installment. And I like Resident Evil too. You know, the movies. I haven't really played the games. I just know from the movies, right? And the story plot is really good because what he said in the video was really true, and it was very true to the movies too, but more so along the lines with the video game. Yeah, I understand that quite well because of the movie, I don't know, I guess you can say, I don't know, chain of movies, more so. So anyway, the whole aspects of you have to face adversity and deal with it. That is very universal, and a lot of people can relate to that. And the way that it's executed, it really draws the attention into having a lot of empathy for the character. That's the difference between, that game series versus this mixtape, whatever that the heck that is. Okay, so X-Men. Now, X-Men story plot was and is very interesting because it centers around a misfit, and they're literally mutants here, misfits. They're literally misfits because they're mutants, and so they are looked upon in society as the other. And the way that it is addressed, it begs the question of putting you in the scenario, the situation of bringing up points of morality of how would you address them if you were in a situation, and then overall going into their perspectives of how they see themselves versus how the society in which they live in see themselves. And then also begs the question and a point of, what does it mean when there is a person who particularly has the ability and wants to showcase the ability that you're not alone. There's nothing wrong. We can use this to your advantage. So we're going to have this sanctity for you to develop your skills. And what happens when you want to break away from that and you don't want to abide by the rules and you're a rogue, and then all these different elements, right? So Magneto, for once, Magneto, you could say Magneto is the one that is focused in on the militant sort of radicalized views of after the nonviolent, and I'll get to the real world situations of what I mean. I'm going to say this in general and then lead to the point here of the after. Now, I'm not going to abide by anything. I'm just going to revoke and do my own thing. And then I don't want to mix or commingle with the X-Men mutants or what have you, because I want to be my own person. I don't want to be like them. I want to just do what I want by any means necessary. Okay? And he exuded that. Magneto. Now you get with Wolverine. Wolverine, you get with Storm, you get with Jean, the list goes on. Xavier, all that. They represent very distinct ideas about the aspects of of the exuding. What do you do when you are facing different levels of intolerance? Okay, so Xavier is the overall leader of the aspects of we must be a unified front. And so I am going to make sure that it's well known. And so that's why he has and makes a school for them, right? But at the same time, he wants them to understand, your abilities are not just defined. You're not just defined by your abilities. You can overcome your adversities, but through peaceful means, okay? And he keeps reminding them of that. But they take that they take that in different ways. Wolverine, for one, is most prevalent and is an uphill battle of him trying to sort all those things out with the aspects of ultraviolence, right? And then, they all try to kind of just merge that together and try to displace everything together into a way that gives them solace, if that makes sense. Now, I really appreciate Stan Lee and his legacy, because Stan Lee in himself, he was masterful at telling stories. And I say this is because I don't fully agree with a lot of different things, his viewpoints. I just appreciate that he gets the understanding of you have to not talk down to the viewer, not talk through to the viewer, your audience. You talk with them and you engage them to see the next piece, or to draw conclusions or figure things out for yourself. Now, it gives a lot of free range to view the aspects of what you're reading in a whole different way. And that's why a lot of people respond to X-Men and different means. And it's just unfortunate, with the New Mutants when it came out, it was just a bag of garbage because of the aspects of forgetting the way and not understanding, or just not being able to. It just boils down to not being able to tell a story correctly. And the reason why is that being flooded, your mind being so diluted and just corrupted with ideologies that are just bad, the aspects of having, gender politics into it where it just doesn't need to be there. Pointless stereotypes is just, the list goes on. And so that was really unfortunate because the New Mutants, it sets up a lot of different subplots, the actual comic book, and to understanding, different characters, particularly with Legion, okay? Or what Legion, the series, is based upon. And not particularly, it's based upon one character that was appearing in Mutants, and then a particular comic book of X-Men that doesn't have to do with the mutants and everything, but it does go with a more modern adaptation of the X-Men, but I'll get into that next week. Alright, so here's the thing. So with the civil rights movement, Stanley he openly said that he made statements and talked about that he saw all the issues that were going on with the civil rights and wanted to address it. Right. So essentially, they are all symbols. The mutants are symbols of civil rights leaders, right? All the mutants are civil rights leaders, and you can say, getting back to Magneto, he is the militant, the Malcolm Xers, the Malcolm X, and everything after the civil rights. All right. Now, I think it was wonderful for the civil rights to have happened, and I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate the aspects of momentum, and that is a testament to what can happen when, in the American government too, in the aspects of what can happen when causes of civil disobedience, of civil disrest, is needing adjustments. Okay, but at the same time, I'm going to be very honest about the situation. There was a lot of flaws in it, to where it's like, when you find out, it's one of those things like when you know something, you can't unknow it. You know what I mean? All right, case in point, the difference is, why is it that with I'm not trying to fluster, but I'm just, getting it right in my mind here. So, all right, so W.E.B. Du Bois, right? Okay, so, and I'll have that link for y'all. Okay, so I knew it and understood it, but going back again, it's like just to double confirm what I understood is something else. So there is a vast difference between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. All right. W.E.B. Du Bois was very focused in on the aspects of, he is affluent. He went to the Ivy Leagues, and these aspects of that, the black experience is something to be theorized and to be socially examined. All right. And so that's why the NAACP was created under his wing. Versus Booker T. Washington, everything that he did, all right, was on merit. Now, that's a quite distinct parallel between the two of them. Now, W.E.B. Du Bois is all about using the theoretics to justify, oppression, right? Which, if you want to go down that map, which you kind of should, but it's up to you, you can say that's the leeway into this aspects of having this idea where it's normalized for, black people to be victims, okay? Or to go around, where's my reparations? Or to go with, to add on to that, BLM and then rioting violently, even say it's peaceful, and to have this erratic behavior that is socially unacceptable, it's just fine because of they're black, and to excuse that. You could say this, right? From my point of view. All right. Now, Booker T. Washington, this man was all exuding the aspects of why it's very important to look at how the foundation of America is very relevant to have people like this in it, okay? Because he exuded the American spirit in so many different ways, it's not even funny. Now, this man, even though he was born in the circumstances of the aspects of him with coming out of slavery, and but he didn't, what the key point to take away from this is he never saw that as an opportunity to be this perpetual victim. He said, this happened, it was terrible, now I can do something about it. I have the means to do something about it, so I'm going to do it. So everything he did was on his own merit. It was all about skill, building up skill. The schools and everything that he built was all about what can you bring to the table? What kind of skills do you have to make something of yourself? And that's wholeheartedly different from W.D. Bois' take. There's aspects of, elitism in the worst way. Elitism is kind of crap, but elitism, and when it's not bad faith characters, I guess, can be okay. When you want to be the elite, that is a different viewpoint that it could take with that. When you are the best of the best as far as the aspects of athleticism and stuff like that, that's different. But you want to be elite just to be, a convoluted, idiot. What is that? That's nothing. And so, and then another example of the aspects of looking at civil rights and the aspects of it, of taking it with a grain of salt and saying, it's far better. It's nice when these kind of things initiate themselves, but it's far better to go on your own merit. Is this? All right, so Rosa Parks, interesting enough. Now I found this out, sometime because I would say around when I started getting into high school or so, I wanted to know more. And so I kind of heard about it. I mean, I knew about it, but I wasn't quite sure. And I found out more, when I graduated from high school. So anyway, interesting enough, with Rosa Parks, she wasn't the first one to refuse to sit the back of the bus and was, and had repercussions for it. Actually, it was Claudette Colvin. She was a 15-year-old girl. She was actually, refusing, even though she paid her fare and everything, bus fare and everything, she was refusing to get up and let a white person sit where she was sitting. And so she was actually jailed, and it was a whole big mess with that. But here's the thing about that. The civil rights leaders, particularly with Rosa Parks and the NAACP and all this stuff, said, well, hey, she's too young. Hey, the image is off. So we're going to use Rosa Parks to be the fronter of it, so she could have this motherly figure. Hey, stop the brakes on that. Like, literally stop the brakes, or metaphorically stop the brakes. You pick. I thought that this movement was all about the aspects of injustice. What does it matter what age? You should uphold that even more so if it's a young person being dealing with stuff like that, because young people are our future. So you mean to tell me because she's too young? See, that's where a lot of cracks start to fall with the aspects of what was actually going on with the civil rights movement. All right. Now, the civil rights movement, when we are looking internally into ourselves, is this. Do you want the aspects of equality? And how do you want that? Most of the time, any normal person does not care about race, really. What the issue here really is that, okay, people are going to be assholes, okay? That's just the way of life. Life is going to be hard. That's how it is. There's nothing new about that. There's nothing that's going to stop. These things have been going on since man has been on this planet, okay? And this whole aspects of interracial relations, that's nothing new. People have been interacting interracially, marrying interracially, commingling interracially for a long time. And it's just the aspects of the American concept of interracial relations was for some reason seen as something that's an offset to that, because of America being its own continent, and country, or United States the continent, America the country, to where the concept of a country having these things put together is, something that's different because of the long-standing tradition of how it's seen that, in other countries, people don't really do that, which is not true. When you look back at history, really look back. I don't know. Okay, there's that. But also, what people don't really want to get into the aspects of why people don't want to be like, begging the question about all these things is social class. I can guarantee you, people will want to be different and treat differently when money is called into the play. Money is in the perspective here. People want to be honest with themselves. They don't want to be just like this or just like that when it comes to money. They want either more or they just don't. It's a whole thing with that. They want to, people want to be honest with themselves. They want more. They want more access to things, right? Or whatever means balance of that. Because essentially, most people want a better life. They don't want to just be not granted more accolades for the work, for the merit. And that's, what should be understood too. And also what should be understood too is the aspects of, people want to focus in on the whole idea that what you should take away from here is, the civil rights was all about, blacks, and that's it. Yeah, sure. But most of it was about the aspects of just being seen for all rights, for everyone. Just be seen like, I want to be like everybody else, and, all of that too. And also, it begs the question too, along the aspects of that, once you've gotten what you need to be like everybody else, do you want to be like everybody else, or do you want to be your own individual? Like, what does that actually mean? And so that's why the civil rights and everything with that is quite interesting, and that's why X-Men is quite interesting, right? Because I'm just looking at it from my point of view. I don't know how God rest his soul, Stan Lee felt about these things. But it's quite interesting because a lot of scenarios and situations that went on in the X-Men, it begs that question too. It's like a lot of how they were set up in the different scenarios was the aspects of them being conflicted of do they want to blend into the society, or how do they feel about blending in with people just like them? How did they cope with that? You see these scenarios set up a lot in the series, and that's why it was very interesting to me. Okay, so that's what I have to say about that. I want to know what you all think. Okay, so feel free to feel free to reach out to me. As I said in the beginning of the show, there's two ways to do this. You can either email me, okay, the kid that keep the conversation going, or you can give me a comment, shout out to me on YouTube. And I will say that if you like me to, I will read those comments, and then I will even, if you want to be featured on my show, I will even do that, because I've done that before, and I will continue that up. It's all up to you, or to all of you. All right, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye for now.